25 years ago, I made a series of films about wine that saw me travel the world, building up into a history, which then became a book. Today, I thought I'd revisit it and cut it up into bite-sized chunks for you to view exclusively online. I hope you enjoyed viewing them as much as I enjoyed making them. The links between wine and religion began to be really strong. With both the Greeks and the Romans, they started to worship Dionysus, the bringer of wine, as a god.
This wine-swilling, wine-squirting, wine-drenched, dancing and chanting throng is the direct descendant of the orgies of Dionysus that rocked ancient Greece 2,500 years ago.
Sex was never far away when Dionysus was about, but then I suppose you could say that of all the Greek gods. But Dionysus was a strange new god, the bringer of wine. And with it, for his followers, a whole new range of sensations. In today's jargon, alcohol depresses the central nervous system. A confusing phrase because depression is the last thing that you feel. It means, of course, a lifting of inhibition, a sense of personal liberation. So Dionysus was not only associated with carnal urges and with consequent fertility, but with all the comfort, pleasure, gaiety, not to say euphoria that wine brings, and with its apparent ability to inspire creative thought and ideas. He had a direct personal relationship with men and women that no other god had achieved. You actually drank the god of wine, and having the god inside you felt good.
Dionysus, the Greek bringer of wine, began to arouse deep and dangerous passions in his followers. Understanding these and acting them out was the origin of the very first theatre.
Dionysus was not one of the 12 original immortals of Olympus. So where did he come from, this 13th god? He came from the East. In fact, his earliest portraits show him as distinctly Oriental. And he came to Greece via Thrace, via Crete, or over the Aegean Sea. This is Delos, a tiny island in the very middle of the Aegean, where no one's lived for centuries. Delos gained an importance out of all proportion to its size as the trading post between Greece and the Eastern Mediterranean, and later with the new Greek colonies in southern Italy. In one sense, Dionysus was a mythical metaphor for the migrants and the merchants who brought wine and vines from Asia to Greece. In this ruined house in Delos, there's a marvelous mosaic where he's riding on a tiger. Often he rides on a leopard. The god is a beautiful young man, almost an angel, with vine leaves in his hair. The beast he's riding, which is supposed to look ferocious, symbolizes both the East and the savage forces latent in wine and its god. This paradox of pleasure and danger, inspiration and threat that Dionysus represented contained the seeds of drama. From prehistoric times, sacrifices, at first of human beings, then of animals, were ritualized drama at its most primitive. Wine came to play an important part in sacrificial rites, either mixed with blood or on its own, as a metaphor for blood. Priests poured a libation of wine on an altar or the ground as an offering to their god. There are parts of Africa where even today no one will drink even beer without first splashing some on the ground. The Greeks gave Dionysus his full share of libations and sacrifices. The classical columns of Athens look the embodiment of rationality, but on the first day of its great Dionysia festival in April, hundreds of animals, mainly bulls, were slaughtered. By the end of the day, the city stank of blood and wine. Yet the genius of Greece was to find the perfect artistic expression for every emotion, every paradox. Dionysus stood for deep and dangerous feelings. Yet in Athenian hands, their ritualized portrayal became the very first theatre.
Wine plays a vital part in both the Jewish and the Christian religions. There are many references to it in the Bible. The symbolism, celebration, sacrament means that it naturally spread around the world as the religions spread.
This is the Sea of Galilee. In Christian minds, its lovely name must conjure up a picture of peace and miracles and the Sermon on the Mount. In fact, just over there is the Mount on which Christ said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." But there, I can see a cleft in the hills where the Crusaders were finally routed by the great Saladin. And behind me is our battlefield vineyard high on the Golan Heights. Christ was brought up, of course, in the full Jewish faith. He was taught to use wine sparingly and often. He even called himself the true vine. The first of his miracles was a confirmation, and a rather odd one in a way, that wine is a vital part of the joy of life.
Here in the little Arab town of Cana stands a Christian church built by the Franciscan brothers on the very spot where they say Christ performed his first miracle. He was invited with his mother to a wedding.
Everyone knows the story. The wine ran out. And when Jesus' mother appealed to him for help, he sent the servants to fill 6 large pots with water from the well, which is still down here in the crypt. When the water was poured out, it was wine. And to the guests' surprise, the second round was even better than the first round of wine that the bridegroom had provided. The church points out that with this miracle, Christ was blessing the institution of marriage. He was certainly blessing wine.
The climax of Christ's teachings came at the Last Supper, which was a Passover meal. He blessed his cup of wine and said to his disciples, "Do this as oft as ye shall drink it, in remembrance of me." Jews always blessed their wine cup. They were commanded to be joyful. So when Christ made bread and wine the continuing symbol of his body and blood, he was building on Jewish practice.
But it's an even older idea that wine symbolizes blood. It goes right back to ancient sacrifice. The followers of Dionysus drank their god. They felt the effects of wine as liberation. Christ's agonized decision to die took place in this garden just under the walls of Jerusalem, among olive trees that are now 2,000 years old. Its name is Gethsemane, which means a pressing place for wine and oil. The completely new message of the Christian church is that each sanctified meal of bread and wine is a reminder of Christ's sacrifice of himself. There's a huge difference between liberation of the spirit and salvation of the soul.